Meet in the supply closet. You're on the ward, and you can't tell what's regular activity and what's missing patient trailing IV drip and disappeared into the ether territory. Teller rounds the corner and, approaching, looks excited and disheveled. Nice but uncared for shirt hanging half out. This is his majority setting. You ask, what have we got? What don't we got? First question's probably quicker. One of Teller's exes said that you and Teller were more than just workable partners, that you were a double act. Well, putting the sign aside for now, because obviously that both confirms and confuses more things than we can count. An orderly coming in through the main entrance to the hospital thinks he saw someone stumble out, matching his description. But meanwhile, some geriatric off the psych ward escaped, if you like, around the same time. Same hour slot, anyway. Plus, he says he was distracted, and a visiting member of the public who was smoking a cigarette on the east side of the car park saw a figure. Ambling, he said, but again, near a street light has been out for weeks, so you didn't see much more than a shadowy bulk. An ambling, shadowy bulk. Put out an APB. Yeah, right. Also that guy, the visitor, I mean, he was a little skittish coming forward, as you're not supposed to smoke there. This makes you laugh, considering the crime rate and the police resources of this city, and the multitudes that blind eyes are turned to. Duty nurse? He seemed a little spooked, actually, like almost too much. Not as if the sign was in blood at the end of the day. Could have been dementia patient graffiti for all she knows. Wondered if she was guilty, then wondered if she was strung out, then just figured she's high-strung. Anything else? There was one thing, less weird, but random. Could be something, could be nothing. Don't keep me in suspense. They also found a slab of bloody meat in the janitor supply cupboard. Define a slab. Well, a large fucking chunk, Cedric. I think, obviously odd, but is it connected odd? Well, back in the squad, we used to say no such thing as coincidence. But I don't know anymore. Starting to think Burroughs was right. What? Who? Doesn't matter. I assume we questioned the janitor about the meat. He seemed okay. If he stole it, he wouldn't store it there, would he? Unrefrigerated, on the fucking floor. Fine, but run him anyway. You were responding to the look he gives you in response when you say, something's wrong, and our two wrongs just collided. We gotta cover every side of this. Teller nods, shuffles pages. What cut? Anything tasty? Lamb, they think. Lamb, hey, got ourselves a fancy janitor. You're here, acting like cops as opposed to private detectives, because your history and, let's say, compromised dismissal have given you something close to carte blanche across much of the city. Just as long as you remain on the right side of the law and don't step on the wrong toes. Some toes would rather not encounter you at all. On your way to see the duty nurse, you pass a coffee machine and stop to get one. This turns out to be a tactical error, because as the machine is about midway through spraying scalding water onto the ghosts of coffee beans, who would sidle up to you beside Kurtz, Jarvis Kurtz? You haven't seen this piece of insidious shit for about 5 months, and it isn't nearly long enough. It takes every ounce of self-control your tired body possesses to not groan out loud there and then. This motherfucker is a classic example of ugly on the inside and the out. His funny-shaped head is top half insidious pedo doughball, a putin face, the lower half a Batman jaw. Bucks the trends. But it's his goddamn eyes that you cannot stand. so pale and almost square they search too much, they see much, and when they settle upon you, well, you want to break the Batman jaw. Jarvis is like the anti-Crothers when it comes to fashion. He tries and dies every time. Today, his trousers, even more ill-fitting than usual, melt into the gray tiles of the hospital floor. Now, his hairy hands beat a ring, a golden wedding band, and this is an irritation. Teller once quipped that the only ring I thought that guy would wear on his finger would be attached to a little boy's anal cavity. You were impressed by this Crothers-style line. Marge was not. As he babbles on, all you can hear is your desire to pop the prominent pimple above one of his eyebrows. It's ripe and ready, and you ponder why he doesn't just do the deed. Fuck, you hate Jarvis. You once saw him wearing a bandana at a works bash and initially thought it was a joke. But, to your dismay, he wore that thing all night. His wife, once too good for him, seems to have been soured by him. Between the sight of Jarvis and the too bright hospital light, you can feel a headache coming on. You rub your eyes and make your excuses. You finally track down the duty nurse to the reception desk. Teller was right about her, but also wrong. Or there's more at least. Seldom washed hair, wrinkles around the eyes, blisters around the nose. Subtle, but there is your close enough and know to look. And the strangest black smudge just right of her lips. Doesn't look like dirt or ink or any kind of temporary mark, but also unlike a birthmark or burn you've ever seen. There's something a little unnerving about it, and it elicits sympathy for this woman who may have been very pretty once upon a time. Her uniform, however, is clean and pressed, and she holds herself with a certain authoritative confidence. She reminds you of the closest thing you ever came to marriage, and this puts you even more on the back foot. Teller is right that she is high-strung, but she's strung out too, or at least has been in the last 48 hours. You detect hidden depths and would rather never meet again. You hope that she won't prove relevant to the investigation. The more you question her, the more she eases up. You ask her a bunch of questions you know she has already been asked a dozen times now. You ask her about the old man who ambled off the psych ward. You ask her who was first to discover the paint, the purple sign, above Yu Ping's bed, and if anybody touched the paint when it was still wet. You ask her if they ever found meat or any other weird things in the storage cupboards before. And finally, you ask her where she could be reached if you have any more questions. You never really sense any dishonesty in her responses, but something is just wrong with the whole scene. You decide to snoop around the general area outside. See what your spidey sense tells you. It's quiet and there are less cars than you expect. A spent newspaper blows about in the gaps between them. You look up at the moon. It's large and full, but distant. Some shouting startles you, a quarreling couple, but they soon vanish. For a moment, Nurse Sanders pops back into your head. You see a cat, colored funny under the streetlight, creep around a large bin. For a moment you think the silhouette of a person is watching you from the grass embankment, but after a bit more staring, your eyes adjust to reality, a partially lit sign for the road above. The light is funny here. The moon and sodium mixing into light and diffusing into shadow. Behind it, the financial district. Its distinctive, some say iconic, twin building of gold and platinum light. You have a friend from before your homicide days, when you spent a brief period in vice. Being one of a tiny minority you are still in touch with in a personal capacity, he called you a few nights before, expressing his frustration with a crypto-driven deep web-linked laundering case. The type where the cartels and corporations get in bed together in the lower echelons of the dark net for a mutually beneficial gangbang, or perhaps orgy would be a more fitting metaphor. Society being the one on the other end of the gangbang dynamic, the cartels and corporation being most satisfied with the arrangement. He talked of how follow the money was for the TV cops only. Try and follow the money in the real world, he said, and it would lead straight into a Bermuda Triangle just off the coast of the Cayman Islands. One obsequious little suit cunt in particular was driving Scion up the wall. But it was the SEC, the so-called regulator, for whom the worst of Scion's ire was reserved. You suddenly wish you were home. The streets have changed for you. You think of a thorium for a moment before pushing it back from your mind, back to where the thoughts are before they're born, and you remember what somebody said about this. You look down, and the cat has joined you, all the light of the city reflected in its dull eyes. It knows nothing. It can't tell you a damn thing.